You already know this story. You've heard it 1,000 times before. The big bad somehow weasels the hero into making a mutually binding agreement, but of course, there's more to it than there seems. Fine print, hidden stakes, ramifications our hero couldn't possibly have predicted. And now they've got to find some way out. Lucky for them, 9 times out of 10 the whole arrangement backfires on the big bad and actually allows the hero to come out on top. But it doesn't always have to be that simple. There are countless permutations here. It's probably up there among the most beloved plot devices in the world. You've seen it in The Little Mermaid, Faust, Phantom of the Opera, any story which features a genie in a lamp, and a million other places beside. But there are still 1,000,001 ways that it hasn't been told yet. And if you stick around, I think I might just be able to help you find some of them. Deal? Having trouble writing? Well, there's a class you can take for free that I think will really help. It certainly helped me. The Creative Writing Bootcamp, taught by best-selling author Myla Goldberg. Check the description to see how you can get access to it and change how you think about writing forever without spending a dime. A big thanks to Skillshare for sponsoring this video and giving us the opportunity to tell you about it. It's really nice to be able to share something with you this way that I genuinely love instead of some mobile game I've never played before or something. I hope you'll give it a look. Contracts are a weird social territory. They create a very particular dynamic. Signing a contract is a lot like making a promise, but it's also a lot different. Promises are altruistic. You make them without receiving any explicit benefit in return. That's interesting in its own way, but it doesn't carry the same tension that a contractual relationship does. A contract simultaneously guarantees trust and signals its absence. Yes, both signers are making a promise to each other, but the altruism of that vanishes into the contract's clauses and stipulations. All of this to ensure fairness and justice, that neither party will leave the situation any worse off than the other, which makes it kind of ironic that the majority of the contracts we see in these stories are designed not to be fair. Every contract has 2 essential parties. We'll call them the broker, who writes the contract, and the signer, who agrees to the terms laid out. There's some room for flexibility with that arrangement, and it does change from story to story, but it's a tidy way to start picking this dynamic apart. The broker is usually the bad guy. Doesn't have to be, but usually is. They are the power holder in the dynamic, using their tools and influence to lure the signer into the agreement. Sometimes it's just a matter of morals. They might just be willing to take advantage of you, and that could be enough. Sometimes it's strength. They can put you up against a wall and force your agreement. And sometimes it's a whole lot more than either of those. I think the pinnacles of this role are the truly powerful brokers, wielders of magic who can take the terms and the stakes of the contract to new heights. These are your cruel demonic taskmasters, your sadistic fairies, scheming sorcerers, angry genies trapped in lamps. They can offer you incentives no one else ever could, things too good to pass up. They can conjure forces to ensure that you adhere to the terms they've laid out. And just as often, they are inherently, magically beholden to the terms of their own con. No legal system required. Almost a type of self-limiting power? I should make a quick caveat. Not every single broker with magical powers is like this. Some are just innocent sprites who want to trade some midnight labor for a heel of bread. Some are old gods who've built entire, thriving empires on contracts. The power to set the terms of the contract need not always be used for evil, although it often is, and often that's a lot more fun. But a question I often end up asking myself is, why? With all of that power at their disposal, why bother writing up a contract instead of just seizing what they want? After some thought, it seems like there are actually a lot of really interesting reasons for them to. First, we shouldn't assume that power means omnipotence. In a lot of these stories, simply having power is as difficult to navigate as the contract itself. You often see brokers tiptoeing around some set of rules that they have to obey, struggling with their own inherent limitations. Sometimes they simply can't get whatever it is they're after all on their own, and in those cases, they have to rely on someone else. But that is a dicey proposal for anyone who values power. Reliance is vulnerability. So, how do you convince someone to do something of their own free will and keep control of the situation? A contract. There's another good reason I think a broker might do this kind of thing. Yes, maybe they can just take whatever they want for the most part, but the truth is that some things are just not takeable. Things like dignity and respect. Perhaps they have all the power in the world and the will to use it for evil, but they don't want to feel like that's what they're doing. They don't want to be seen that way. Maybe they want to believe their actions are fair and just. And a contract with well-defined terms which both parties agree to guarantees that they get what they want without sacrificing their precious self-image. On the other hand, for some brokers it's just not really that complicated. Yes, they could just use their power to take things by force, but that wouldn't be very interesting, would it? To them, the contract represents a challenge, something to test and validate their indomitable cunning or strength or position. Despite how often we see it, I think this is realistically a rare level of hubris for someone to reach. But beings like fairies and demons, with their otherworldly sensibilities and their powers orders of magnitude greater than any mortals, do seem a bit more liable to think this way. If the broker is almost always the villain, what does that make the signer? I think the answer to that mostly depends on why they're entering the contract in the first place. What would ever possess a person to take a shady deal like this? Why would you ever trust terms set by a fairy or a demon? Well, it's not always a choice, is it? If your options are to die or to accept the terms of an extremely predatory deal, technically you are choosing to put your ex on the line, but only as a strict matter of necessity. In legal terms, this is sometimes called a leonine contract and can often be found unconscionable in court. It doesn't take a lot to see why. It's a proposal that exploits a position of desperation, forcing the signer's hand. Sometimes bad help is better than none at all, but often the terms of these contracts turn out to be worse than whatever fate they'd help you dodge. It's not always like this, though. When the stakes are high but the signer really does have a choice, instead of pathetic, the decision becomes heroic. This is Hercules offering his soul to save Meg in the Disney adaptation, Katniss Everdeen taking her sister's place in the Hunger Games, Dorothy deciding to play the Gnome King's game in Ozma of Oz. It's not a straight-up sacrifice, but the deal is bad enough that it might as well be. It also doesn't have to be either of those things. Instead of pathetic or heroic, sometimes the signer is just kind of dumb, foolhardy, blind. Sometimes you want something so badly you don't even consider the danger. Like Ariel in The Little Mermaid, who offers up her voice and her soul for a chance at love. And other times you just aren't scared of the contract at all. Maybe you didn't read it hard enough, or you're just that confident in yourself. Maybe when the devil offers you a fiddle of gold against your soul because he thinks he's better than you genuinely believe you can beat him. It's a little harder to be as sympathetic to these cases where people take the deal of their own selfish, short-sighted reasons, but it's certainly no less interesting to watch. The last reason I can see someone signing one of these things, and probably the most common, is that they didn't even mean to do it in the first place. They were fooled into it, or the deal itself was misrepresented. The true terms of these contracts are often gotcha moments which come out of nowhere and pull the rug out from under you. So, we have contracts, and we have the characters who get wrapped up in them. Powerful brokers who need something beyond their reach, or a sense of dignity, or some good entertainment. The much weaker signers, who are making the only choice they have, or the heroic choice, or the foolish choice, or who aren't even sure what they've chosen at all. That's all very interesting, but why does it show up so often in fiction? Honestly, I think the answer is pretty simple. We can even sort of see it already, peeking through the motivations of these characters. Contracts create a power dynamic, which has the potential to change the lives and the stories of those involved. They're fabulous for plot, and even better for character, offering a conflict with tightly defined boundaries, which allow us to see where the characters stand with more clarity than usual. One of the funnest and most interesting things about this interaction to me is that, although the power imbalance is one of the key features in most of these scenarios, both parties are technically rendered vulnerable because of how contracts work. The signer is often trapped in a predatory agreement, but as often as not, the broker ends up snared in their own trap. Whether that means they're simply bound to actually honor their agreement, or the terms of the contract somehow end up working against them, the fact that they've made a promise too makes this situation far more interesting. There are clear stakes for both parties, and we know exactly the conditions under which they'll be lost. We just don't know how or if we'll get there. Another interesting effect of contracts is that, despite the fact that they're often meant as a way for the broker to take advantage of the signer, they can also actually level the playing field between them. It doesn't really matter if you're dealing with an all-powerful supernatural being, if you've agreed to stake everything on a game of chess. Now, suddenly, even if it's still going to be difficult, you at least have a hope of victory. This is what a lot of those smug fairies end up doing to themselves when they decide to play a game instead of just taking what they want. Thinking that there's no way they could possibly lose to a mortal, they stoop down to the signer's level and are almost always unpleasantly surprised by the hero's tenacity or cleverness. Sometimes the signer will even be the one to suggest the deal to the would-be broker in a bid to balance things out, often appealing to their ego. Surely someone as clever as you could beat me in a simple game of chess? That kind of thing. But even if the broker is very careful with the terms of their contract, sometimes the contract itself is the trap. The terms are defined. They're there, set in place. All the hero has to do is find a loophole or change the circumstances surrounding the deal, and suddenly the agreement means something very different from what the broker intended. And now, here they are, bound to the terms they've set. A way of shrinking the power differential that wouldn't have been possible without the contract. There's another side of this too. Less to do with the plot, more to do with people. The power dynamics of contracts don't just inform where characters end up, but how we see them as well. Because what does a character do under pressure? It crystallizes. We find out who people really are during their most difficult moments. And in this way, a contract can be like a character compactor, clearly defining the parameters of their conflict and allowing us to gauge their response to the outcome. A broker who accepts their defeat gracefully, for instance, is going to leave a far better impression on the mind than a broker who sees the scales tipping and cheats to keep it from happening, like Ursula in The Little Mermaid, or a broker who throws a temper tantrum so bad when things don't go their way that they literally tear themselves in half, like Rumpelstiltskin. And the signer? I mean, this is where they prove themselves, right? Are they clever enough or skillful enough to navigate the contract's parameters and come out on top? Do they have the willpower to face what seems like impossible odds against them? Will they crack under pressure and give up? Will they panic and search frantically for ways out? Or will they honor the terms of their contract? Are they defiant even in failure, or consigned to their fate? All of these responses tell us a great deal about the character, and the contract's strict boundaries help us to understand what precisely caused them to react this way. Are they a victim, a hero, or a fool? We'll find out. Well, I call that a pretty convincing pitch on why contracts are an awesome plot device, and probably why they show up so often in stories. But it's more than that too. We're not just here to show off what a bunch of other stories have done. The hope is that you'll use this as well. Take these elements, the motivations, the conflicts, the character revelations, and use them in your own work to test your characters. No, not every story needs this treatment, but at the very least it can be a fun experiment. How would your characters handle being tricked into a contract? How would they respond to the impending fulfillment of its terms? If you're writing a villain, how would they lure someone else into a contract? What would they do if their scheme was ruined and they were humiliated? Thrust them into this character compactor and see how they shine or shatter. I say that like it's something you can just do, but you know, the majority of writers I talk to are actually caught on the first step of the whole process, how to even start. It's great to have these ideas to play around with, but it can be frustrating if, when you try to use them, the words just refuse to come out right. If you find yourself in that camp, maybe this video won't really help you that much, but I do know something that will. Recently I found a video series called Creative Writing Bootcamp, and it gives you so much to start with if you're a new writer. There are things in here I wish I'd been told 10 years ago. Things like where ideas come from, how to relate to your characters, how to write conversations, settings, even how to go against the common wisdom and write what you don't know. The series was put together by best-selling author Myla Goldberg, and her enthusiasm and joy as she teaches is absolutely contagious. You will end the series ready to write something. And thanks to our sponsor Skillshare, you can actually watch it for free. I personally would sign up for this course alone, but you also get access to thousands of other classes as well. Experts from pretty much every discipline have gathered there to share their knowledge and experience. There are classes on creative writing, illustration, fine art, animation, graphic design, film and video, pretty much anything you can imagine. You can even join in on live classes, connecting with other creators and teachers while you learn. After talking to them about it, it seems like the people over at Skillshare can see why we're so excited about this writing class, so they've decided to give you the opportunity to experience it and any other Skillshare class that catches your interest for free. This month, the first 1,000 Foundry fans who join the Skillshare community will get not just the usual 15-day trial for free, but a full 30-day trial. An entire month of free learning and expert guidance on all the creative things you ever wanted to do. Click the link in the description or the link right at the end of this video to get started. And I would definitely hurry because those slots are going to fill up fast. Once you've watched through Myla Goldberg's Creative Writing Bootcamp, please come back and tell us the impact it's had on you as a writer. I cannot wait to hear the success stories. Well, we made it to the end. I guess that means you've fulfilled your half of our deal. But have I? Do you feel like you found a new story in all of this? I guess I'll have to read the comments to find out. Don't let me down. I'd better see some good ideas down there. After talking about all of this, I'd hate to find out what fate has in store for me if I break this deal.